So it's time for a what am I sowing and what am I growing video for February, and I'll do another video for March as well, just to give you a kind of sneak peek as to what's going to be going on. I wanted to start though just by talking a little bit about why it's worth starting some things in December and January when conventional wisdom basically says it's not a particularly good idea. And I thought I would just illustrate that by showing you some of the seedlings, some of the good and some of the not so good. And I'll start with the peppers. So these are my early peppers, the ones that I started back in December, and you can see that they look really nice and healthy. They're starting to side shoot actually, which is a really good sign. A lot of people ask me whether I top them. I don't top them. I just leave them to grow naturally. I find that they just develop side shoots and thicken up, you know, as nature intended basically, when they've got enough leaf growth to support side shoot development and when the stems, you know, are nice and stocky. So that's one of those, and I've got another one here. And these are this is a quarter basically of my peppers. So I've got sweet peppers and chili peppers. They both basically look the same. There's just one little plant there that has failed to thrive, but I always grow a few spares, which I give away to very happy recipients. So that's why I do my first batch of peppers in December, so I can get these kind of lovely early plants ready to put in the polytunnel in sort of May. And I'm kind of prepared to take a little bit of a risk on those because I will have some spare plants just to get that sort of super early harvest in sort of June and July sort of time. And obviously we're kind of running out of peppers from the freezer by then, so it's really nice to have this nice early crop. So the next thing that I like to do, for example, is early kales. So these are a mix of green curly kales and red curly kales, and I just love to have a continuous supply of kales all the way through the year. And I find that if I don't start these in January, then I won't have them ready in May. And May is when all of my overwintered kales have kind of gone to seed. So I really like to get those started nice and early. And I also really like Brussels sprouts. And I love the leaves of the Brussels sprouts, and I love the sprouts themselves. And so I like to get those nice and early as well. And I just think they're a beautiful leaf harvest in the kind of May, June, July kind of period. And then the kind of main crop, Brussels sprouts, come sort of ready in August, September, October for a leaf harvest. And then obviously we'll have in the sprouts over winter. And red cabbages. I just like to get a start on the red cabbages. I've got some overwintered red cabbages, but yeah, I just really love to have a few early red cabbages. And I don't do very many of them, just the number that I need for the month that I'm sowing them in, basically. And then we're raining now, sorry about this, but we tend to run out of beetroot in about May, so I like to have a new crop of beetroot ready, and so I start just this one tray of beetroot nice and early, and those will go again in the polytunnel and at the back of some of the low tunnels where they'll be warm enough, because it's still far too cold really for beetroot. They're a little bit leggy, as you can see, but you can plant beetroot as deep as you want, so you can plant them up to the first leaf here, so they'll look as if they're lovely stocky little plants by the time they get planted. And these are only what day are we on now, 28th, so these are 18 days old, so they'll be planted out sometime sort of late next week. And I also like to get an early start on my celery. And so just a few celery here. Obviously there's way too many there, but there was loads in the seed packet. I'll thin them out soon. And there's just a few that'll go in the polytunnel for an early harvest. Now I normally like to overwinter them, but because of that really cold snap that we had, all my overwintered ones, basically they just died, they just rotted. So yeah, so I just started these, just a few. Not, you don't want to do too many, and they'll just be harvested as a cut and come again. So individual stalks at a time. And I just also like to start a few Calabrese, because we love to have a kind of continuous supply of flowering brassicas. And right now we're eating purple sprouting broccoli, and then we'll kind of go on to sort of Calabrese and more purple sprouting broccoli and cauliflowers and things like that. We've got a lot of overwintered cauliflowers and Calabrese as well. So yeah, they're looking okay. They're going to go into the polytunnel now. They don't need to stay at home. And what else have I got? Lettuce. So these are also 18 days old, and these are just beautiful spring varieties of lettuce. And so I just really like to have a nice kind of abundance of lettuce in spring, and a lot of these are going to be harvested not for individual leaves but for heads. So I sow quite a lot of lettuce because we get through a lot of lettuce here. Probably by the time we're harvesting these, we'll probably be feeding 16 people, and everybody's eating, like 2 or 3 big salads every week, and Debbie and I eat a salad every day. So yeah, we get through a lot, and yeah, I really love to have my favourite spring varieties. And so I'll just quickly put up at the side of the screen now all the things that I've just talked about, so that you can see the names of the varieties and the sowing dates and all of that sort of thing. And all the details you'll be able to find in the description below. There'll be a link to the database that I'm showing on the side of the screen right now. So there you go. That's my kind of rationale for why I sow things. And I know it's been a bit quick, but I'll do a sowing and growing video I'll do a seedling progress video next week to show you how everything's going, and I'll go through all the details there, including all my overwintered plants and all the things that I've got planted in the ground and things like that, which obviously I can't show you right now. So that is pretty much what I'm doing. And I just did want to show you, I'm just logging into my iPad. So this is the database here that you're going to be looking at the side of the screen. And this is how I start my peppers. So I don't use any heat. So I just start them like this on a bit of tissue paper, kitchen roll actually, and just put them in the warmest spot in the house, which is just on a windowsill in the hall underneath a big radiator, but not right on top of the radiator. And we don't have the heating on very warm here, only sort of about 18 degrees, 19 degrees, and not for the whole of the day, of course. And they just germinate just fine. So I've never had a problem. I don't need to use a propagator. I did use one last year, but I thought I'd try it this year without. And here, for example, are the seedlings that I sowed back on the 10th. So these are 18 days old. So I chitted them, and as soon as I saw the little roots coming out, I just dropped them into the compost there. And now, 18 days later, they're growing away really nicely. So, and again, no heat for these, no heat mats, no propagators, nothing, just under the grow lights once they've broken surface. Right, so I will throw up on the side of the screen now my sowing database for February, and let me just screen capture it for you. Okay, so normally I would start some peppers, but the peppers have been so good in January. You've just seen some of them down there, and I've got another tray. I don't need any more, so I won't be starting any peppers, I don't think, beyond those in that tray there. And yeah, more red cabbages. But again, I recommend with things that you're doing really early, you do the absolute minimum quantity that you need to be eating in the month that you're going to be sowing them. So I only get through 4 red cabbages a month, or we get through 4 red cabbages a month. So we only do in the early batches 4 red cabbages a month. and then later on we'll do more when it's kind of their main crop sowing time. So then giant red celery, that's a really lovely one, and that will sort of go in the polytunnel and also kind of just scattered around in the corners of some of my low tunnels. And again, it's just be for that cut and come again crop. And I'll sow my main crop celery a little bit later on, the stuff that will grow outside and sort of be frozen and all that. Keep on doing batches of radishes. I've just got a batch of radish now that I sowed back, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they're ready for planting out. I generally don't ever have a bed for radishes. I always interplant them. And these radishes, I think I'm going to interplant with lettuces because I've left a reasonable amount of space between the lettuces, and radishes and lettuces, they go pretty well together. Then about 14th of February, so lots of things about the 14th of February, but nothing special about the date 14th of February. It just happens to be the middle of the month. You could sow them a bit earlier, you could sow them a bit later. It's all going to be fine. There's no such thing as a perfect sowing date, in my opinion. But this is my main crop of red onions. So I'm doing red Baron, and I'm going to do 480, which is slightly more than I need because I like about one a day. But it's always nice to have a few spares. And I do mine I want 3 seeds to germinate per module. So I do them in a 40 cell tray. I'll just pop some up now so you can see some that I did back in January, early January, and they've just germinated now, but they're salad onions. But basically you get the same idea. So 3 per module I want germinated, so I sow 4 seeds, and then I'll thin them out if I get more than that. And then when I plant them out, I'm planting them about 70 to 75 to 80, kind of just depends on the size of the bed, per square metre. And onions kind of respond reasonably well to density. So if you plant more, you'll get lots of small ones. If you plant less, you get lots of big ones. There's no secret really to growing big onions. It's generally just give them a lot of space. I don't want big onions though. I want kind of medium-sized onions because they keep better. And we just use a medium-sized onion sort of every day. So it means you don't end up with half an onion in the fridge. So I'm also going to do some Asian greens. I've already got some lovely Asian greens in the ground, which we're currently harvesting, tatsoi and red pak choi. And I've just planted a batch of tatsoi that started, I think, back in December, and it grew really nicely. And it's been in the ground now for a few weeks, and it's really taken off really well. Much better, actually, than these. I just don't know what happened to these. These are horrible. So those were started 10th of January. And yeah, just look at them. Horrible. The same time, 10th of January, at the same time as those. I have no idea. Same compost, same lights. Well, not quite the same lights, but similar sort of lighting conditions. I don't know. I think maybe they just got too hot in the conservatory, whereas those lettuces were on top of a wardrobe. That is one of the dangers in a conservatory. If you've got sort of grow lights and it's a really sunny day, sometimes they can just get a bit scorched. It only takes one day to knock them back. They'll probably recover. I'll probably move them to the allotment, pop them in the unheated greenhouse and just leave them to it and see what happens. But I've got plenty of Asian greens, so I'm not really overly concerned right now. But I say I will be starting some Joy Choy, some red pak choi and some tatsoi. And these will be the Asian greens that we'll put in the polytunnel and then probably into a cold frame or a low tunnel as well. And we'll eat those all the way up until we put the peppers in and the tomatoes in. So they're a nice kind of gap filler for that period of time. And then we won't do Asian greens then until August for a September harvest, and then obviously all the way through winter. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting those in. I'm also going to start my first cucumbers, and the only reason I do that is because I've got this conservatory and it generally doesn't fall below 10 degrees centigrade at night. And that is kind of essential, I think, if you're going to grow cucumbers in here. I'm also going to have loads of peppers in here and tomatoes and things as well. So, but cucumbers, I think, are just special for me. You know, they're such a beautiful plant, such a productive plant. And unlike kind of early tomatoes, which don't tend to taste that great, early cucumbers taste really good. So, and I say they're just so much more productive than early tomatoes. So I don't really do early tomatoes, but I do early cucumbers. And broad beans. So I've got a batch of broad beans growing in the polytunnel. I've got another batch just ready to be planted out under fleece on the allotment, and then this will be my final batch of broad beans. I don't do very many at a time because, you know, they're so productive, those plants, and we don't like them frozen. So we just basically do enough to kind of keep a nice harvest going fresh all the way through until early summer. And yeah, so they'll be nice. And I just started my first potatoes. Now, we're not eating as many potatoes this year. So although in previous years I've done all sorts of things to kind of push the boundaries on the potato harvest so that we have abundant potatoes all the way through the year, this year we're just kind of doing a few, you know, probably about half the number of potatoes. And so that means I'm not really having to push the boundaries of the potatoes. I'm just going to start these 14th February, and I'll germinate them in the polytunnel. They don't need chitting, they go, you know, they germinate, break surface within about 10 days. Whether they're chitted or not doesn't really make any difference. In the warmth of this conservatory, and then I'll kind of pot them on into their final containers and just stick them in the mini greenhouse or stick them in the polytunnel under fleece at night. So I'll do one more batch of beetroot, just in case there happens to be a problem with the batch that I've just shown you. I won't do very many, but you know, they're just those two batches. They'll last us all the way through summer, really, because there's, you know, 80 beetroot, you know, and they grow really big, you know, so this sort of size. And contrary to popular belief, you know, beetroot that grow quickly and in summer, they're never woody. They're always gorgeous, no matter what sort of size they are. So I'll also do some Burpee's Golden, which are, you know, one of our favourite beetroot. And they are more sensitive to low temperatures and kind of wind and things like that early on in their lives. So they really, you've got to do those under cover. So again, they'll be either at the back of a low tunnel or in the polytunnel. And I'll do about 40 of those, 40 cells of those, 80 of those. And as I say, they will see us then all the way through summer. And so the next sowing I'll do will be my storage crop. And I start my storage crop a little bit earlier than some people. And the reason that I do it is because of light levels for me. I have a lot of shady beds. And if I start my main crop, my storage beetroot rather, in sort of June to plant out in July, it just doesn't get enough sun because of the shade from the trees and sheds and all that sort of thing to bulk up to storage size by the time we get to October. So it's much better for me to start it in May for planting out in June, give it that extra month of sunshine. So next I'll just keep on doing loads of lettuces. And I won't go through all of those, but other than to say that, as I say, a lot of the lettuce that I'm doing is to harvest as full heads now, just because I just find it so much better than individual leaves. You know, the leaf quality is just so much nicer. I just find it a little bit easier as well to plan, knowing that I need so many lettuces heads per week, and then I plant basically that many seeds a few months before. Salad onions, doing loads of salad onions, got loads of salad onions in the ground, of course, at the moment. I've got loads of salad onions just coming, and I just keep on doing salad onions, you know, 1 or 2 trays each month, and they're looking nice. And spinach, so I've got a lot of beautiful spinach again in the ground at the moment. But you have to keep it going because it does run to seed pretty quickly in spring. In sort of late spring. So this will be my last batch, I think, 28th of February, of Red Kitten, which is my favourite spring spinach variety. And then I'll do some Mikado a bit later on, which doesn't go to seed quite as quickly, and that'll run us up till summer. And then we don't really do mature spinach. We'll do baby leaf spinach, but we won't do sort of mature spinach during summer, just because it runs to seed too quickly. And as I've probably mentioned, we've got some of our peas that are in the ground. We started those back in January. They're under a low tunnel. Low tunnel will come off in April, but those are mange too. So this is my first batch on the 28th of February of sugar snaps. And yeah, they will go out in the ground. And because we eat those fresh, straight off the plant, and it's the kids eating them, we want those to have matured before pea moth. So early crops are what we want for peas. And then more swift potatoes. Basically, we're just doing potatoes a couple of times a month, just a couple of containers, because again, with early things, as I mentioned, do the absolute minimum that you need, because if you leave them later, they'll grow so much better. So there's absolutely no point kind of doing 10 pots of early potatoes or something like that. Just do 2 pots every, 1 pot a week or something like that. Just the number that you need to harvest in a few months' time. Radishes, keep on going with radishes. I do radishes basically up until about May time, and then I find the quality kind of degrades, and so I'm absolutely fed up with radishes by that time anyway. And there's so many other amazing things to put in the salad mixes. I don't really care. More salads, slightly different varieties. And I'll start doing a few of my Salanovas, but I'll talk more about the Salanova lettuces in the next video, which is the video for March. So all the details of everything that I grow and plant and harvest and all that sort of thing you can find in the reference section of my ebook, and that goes back 2 years now. So I'm on the 3rd year of those records. And so you can look at, for example, what I sowed in previous years. You can look at what I planted in previous years. You can look at seedling progress videos for previous years. You can look at planting videos for previous years and harvest videos for previous years. All that information is there. And I do kind of recommend you take a look at that, because there's a lot of rubbish, unfortunately, talked about in some of the people in some of these sowing videos on YouTube. And, it's really useful to see actual results that people have from the things that they sow, especially the things that they sow early. Because I just think, some of it, I look at it, I roll my eyes and think, why are people saying sow this at this time of year? It's just nonsense. It's just not necessary or whatever. So, I don't want to make a kind of judgment on what you want to do, but in terms of what I want to do, I want to show you the actual progress. So I actually do want to show you, that. Horrible. And so, yeah, just be careful when you're using grow lights. They're not always, sort of fantastic. You can kind of go a bit over the top. And it's interesting to see, well, you probably can't see, but the red pak choy are fine. It's only the tatsoi and the joy choy that just couldn't cope with those light levels. So, my name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon with another video for March.